Listen, all you New Yorkers. Taxi! Okay, we're looking around.
This is the 77 WABC minicast.
This is far from. This is not lighthearted in the least, as you will find out immediately. But it's something that's been weighing on me. What we're looking at here is it's not just a news story. It's something else. It's think of it almost like a collision of some of the hardest questions a society can face, all kind of compressed into one human life. It's a case of Noelia Castillo. This is a 25-year-old woman who survived a gang rape, endured catastrophic trauma, lived with paralysis and chronic pain, and ultimately chose euthanasia. I mean, it's almost unbearable in layers, in its complexity. And it forces you and a lot of folks to, how do I say this? It's almost unbearable in its layers. It forces you and me and everybody to confront suffering in its rawest form. And then it asks a question most people would rather avoid entirely. What do we do when someone no longer wants to endure it? This is one of the most fascinating issues I find, or I see today, because we have some people who say, and I understand it, they say, you must understand that we cannot in any way allow for anybody to terminate life. Life is beautiful. Life is special. Life must be celebrated, etc., etc., etc. And I understand that. And far be it from me to say that doesn't make any sense. But I always wonder, what do we do with the idea? And what do we do when somebody feels such incredible pain, they say, don't let me endure this any longer? So the story continues rather. First, the tragedy itself stands alone. This is a young woman who was placed in a system that was supposed to protect her. Instead, it became the site of profound violence. I mean, we somehow, society, should have protected her. I don't know how we would have, but theoretically, this is the most important. This is a young woman placed, and left to suffer something inordinate. And that failure, by the way, is not abstract. It's kind of institutional. We as humans, we collectively all share blame because one of our fellow spawn did this. I mean, everything that followed her trauma, her suicide attempt, her paralysis, traces back to that moment. And that matters because what happens is it complicates things even more so. Okay, this was not a case of terminal illness or physical decline. This was a life shattered by violence, followed by a long descent into pain, both physical and psychological. And she described exhaustion, isolation, and an inability to continue. Not a momentary impulse, not something that's transitory, that's immediate, but something that's sustained. Sustained and years long in terms of its struggle, its horror. Now, that is where the ethical divide begins. Now, on one side is the argument for autonomy. The idea that an adult deemed mentally competent has the right to decide when something becomes intolerable. For example, Spain's courts ultimately affirmed that position, even in the face of family opposition, concluding that her decision was free, conscious, and informed. And on the other side is a quieter, but something also which is fascinating, but also very, very unsettling. When suffering is rooted in trauma or in violence, in failures of care, is ending life truly a free choice, or is it the following, I guess, how do I say this? Or is it the final consequence maybe of everything that went wrong before? Now, by the way, this woman, her father's opposition, however painful or controversial, reflects that tension. He didn't want this. He didn't see a rational end-of-life decision. What would you suggest? Somebody suggested one time to me, I'll never forget this. They said, and the argument was, remember it during, this is terrible, during 9/11, when people were standing on a ledge, hanging out of a window, as the fires raged toward them, they jumped. They didn't commit suicide. They jumped to avoid what was coming at them. They jumped to avoid that. So it was a difference. So some people have suggested that when others are so consumed by trauma, so consumed by depression, so consumed by whatever you want to call this, that they have, how do I say this, that they will find this as a way out. My wife and I had a friend of ours who lived like down the hall from us. We kind of knew her. Didn't see her for a while. She was very interesting. I'm not going to go too much into her past, but she had her own fame of sorts. Very, very troubled. Very troubled. You could see it immediately. And we read the newspaper, or read the news, and sure enough, she went to, I think it was Switzerland, and killed herself. And they're having pods that are available, and you can go into it, and they can turn up the nitrogen or what have you. Now, here's my issue. This is what I'm going to ask you about. The way I see this is that I believe, ultimately, at least in the idea, theoretically, that yes, you have some kind of autonomy. There may come a point. There may come, and if this is completely contrary to your religion, I understand. Believe me, I'm not going to argue that point, and I can understand your objection. But I think there comes to a point when everybody, at least all of us, realize that we want to be able to say, all right, I've had enough. How many times has friends of yours said, listen, if anything happens to me, if I'm ever rendered whatever, just don't let me suffer. Don't let me, just do me in. I've said this. Repeated. I've talked to a friend of mine who's a physician. I'm saying, look, if there's anything, if we get to this point and how we define it, I'm not sure. But this requires us to discuss this and for you to ask the question, do you have a say? If I have a do not resuscitate order, if I have a do not hydrate or feed, what am I doing? I'm committing, in essence, suicide slower. I'm not doing it necessarily as fast as other particular methodologies, but who am I kidding? I'm killing myself. I'm starving myself. I'm depriving myself of food and hydration.